Good data leads to better decision making. It helps communities identify opportunities, prepare for emergencies, and improve quality of life. Data often sits in siloed databases or clumsy spreadsheets. Creating reports and turning them into actionable insights can sometimes feel impossible. That's why we created Cityworks. Cityworks is the original GIS-centric asset management solution designed to fully leverage your organization's investment in Esri's ArcGIS database. It's more than just inspections, work orders, and managing permits. Cityworks integrates your data, teams, community, and systems together to help improve community management from top to bottom. Our open platform uses GIS intelligence to help you manage, visualize, and understand your complex data. Cityworks uses ArcGIS as the system of record, allowing you to easily track and visualize every asset. You can monitor maintenance schedules, equipment use, labor costs, permitting workflows, asset conditions, and risk assessment in real time on a single centralized platform. Bringing this data to your fingertips allows you to streamline fieldwork, warehouse inventory, customer feedback, and stakeholder insights both on-site and remotely. With Cityworks and ArcGIS, your community is empowered with scalable solutions that provide better data, better insights, and better decisions. Through improved operations, Cityworks helps you achieve efficient and sustainable growth to keep your community safe, resilient, and thriving.
We have a great lineup today of customers: St. Johns County, Florida, City of Evansville, Florida, Indiana, Indio Water Authority in California, City of Philadelphia, City of Round Rock, Texas. And we'll also be hearing from Becky Tamaszewski, our VP of Product and Vision, and as well as from John Conkus with Woolpert, who will be talking to us about funding resources with all of the infrastructure and ARPA bills and talk and on Washington Hill. He'll be sharing a little bit of that, and that's what I'm alluding to as well with the upcoming webinar with eBuilder. So thank you all for participating today. We know it's a huge time commitment as you share with us. Let's get started though right away with fleet maintenance, and we're going to be hearing from St. John's with Rocky and Krista. Fleet maintenance management can be one of the largest challenges that cities face. And it's just such a massive undertaking to keep everything running and operating well just from our transportation, our vehicles. And so Rocky and Krista will be presenting on how they are using Cityworks for fleet maintenance and operations in St. Johns County, Florida. And Rocky, Krista, we'll let you take it from here.
Good morning. My name is Rocky Agbunog. I'm the Information Systems Manager for St. Johns County, Florida. With me presenting our implementation of Cityworks for Fleet is Krista Marvell, who's our Senior GIS Analyst. So that was kind of like, quick brief. St. Johns County is located in northeast Florida, just directly south of Jacksonville, about 2 hours north of Orlando. So St. Johns County is one of the fastest growing county in the state, and we have an increase of 44% population since the last census. The main users of Cityworks within the county is our Public Works Department and Utilities Department. Public Works consists of the engineering, operation, traffic, also that handles all the sign signals, pavement management, and also of course our road and bridge and handles all the drainage and road infrastructure maintenance, so as fleet, solid waste, construction services. So we've been a user of Cityworks since 2005. We have about 150 plus users, and I think our utilities department is about close to 200, I believe. So quick facts about St. Johns County. It's the home of St. Augustine, the nation's oldest settled city. So we have a lot of historical landmarks. So it's a very tourism development economy. So we have 42 miles of coastal beach and also surrounded by St. Johns County River. So our implementation of Cityworks for Fleet, and pretty much started in 2008. They've been using it for a while. So around 2018, 19, we came up with a neat assessment to kind of see how Cityworks is operating, how can we enhance it, how can we better use of our GIS and come up with better reporting. So that was kind of like a big overhaul that we did to just kind of make sure that fleet is up to speed and using Cityworks as their main work order system. So we want to have a reliable data, reliable system that we can produce like scheduling as well as life cycle predictive analysis. And the main thing that we want to be able to do is the cradle to grave management of our fleet. So we did a lot of those enhancements, and we want to leverage obviously Cityworks more and GIS overall of how fleet operates and use Cityworks. So some of our key solution that we were working on was basically, ultimately, we just had to learn how a fleet operates, from as simple as them receiving the vehicles, creating the work orders, how to do their what is it called when they do their PM maintenance, what level of maintenance are they doing. So we literally have to kind of dive in and get into how a fleet operates, and we want to definitely leverage what we have in our GIS enterprise system as well as Cityworks to basically use it for their fleet maintenance. And throughout this implementation, we want to make sure that stakeholders are aware of what we're solving and what we're enhancing to kind of make more like an actual big impact that they can actually see. And ultimately, reporting data we have in the past, it just wasn't enough. We just need to have more reliable data. We just need to have the cleaner data, so we can have our fleet shop or our operations to be able to dive and drill down to the data. So kind of come up with their own data, their own reporting, their own way of actually analyzing their data a little bit better. So some of our implementation efforts, we basically took it apart in 4 different sections. The biggest effort that we did was to scrub the data, to make it a little bit more standardized, make it more accurate, as simple as spelling the word Ford, F-150, or whatnot, and to come up with an industry standard of actually keeping up with those data. And ultimately, our goal is to have that way of doing insights and analytics to this data to make it a little bit more user-friendly, make it a little bit more refined. And we also analyze and assess how are they actually using the process of using Cityworks. Are this work order templates even relevant to what they're doing now? Has it changed? And one of the main things that they wanted for us to do is to be able to just to have a standard of work orders and be able to have different ways to kind of elaborate on what kind of PM are they doing, and ultimately is to kind of notify our stakeholders and come up with APIs a little bit better. So this bullet points is just kind of our main milestones that we kind of presented to our stakeholders. So we definitely did a lot of overhauling to the user interface and leveraged the inbox a lot, XML changes, and also looked at Response. And one of the stuff that we're looking at right now is the allocation manager plugin for Response. And one of the biggest implementation that we have is the NAPA integration within our work order system. We want to make sure that's intact. And eventually later on, Cityworks and NAPA, there's an API that we'd like to leverage to make this system a little bit better. And ultimately, it's come up with those reports that they can see to kind of analyze and be able to come up with scheduling their PMs and when certain things need to be scheduled, and come up with some trigger points and leverage the operational insights, leverage our GIS insights, and any other reporting. So all of this will basically kind of gel all together. So we had to kind of get all this information to kind of come up with this enhanced Cityworks for Fleet. So next couple slides, I'll have Krista kind of go through some of the implementation that we did.
Thanks, Rocky. Yeah, we took some time to identify and resolve the pain points that our fleet staff was experiencing. We did this through meetings and interactions. We learned a lot about the industry standard activities that are within the fleet industry in order to make more relevant and specific work order categories and descriptions. And we'll see a little bit about that. And that's really one of the critical pieces, is being specific about the work order categories and the descriptions. In addition, we really, as Rocky was saying, we wanted a reliable maintenance scheduling. And in order to do that, we really needed to optimize fleet's workflows within Cityworks and how they use Cityworks. And in addition, to prioritize data automation with the use of box solutions and other integrations. And so here we're going to kind of give a little dive into our inbox. We're looking at the inbox that's, representing some standard operating procedures available, some reporting. We've summarized a lot of the information about heavy shop versus light shops on an easy clickable screen within Cityworks using searches, GIS searches, and other items. And here, because of those specific work order types, we can really get a snapshot about what types of work fleet are doing in the last 30 days, very specific to the task itself. And now we're going to kind of go through how we're creating work orders. We're searching with the 4-digit CV number, and the information, of course, has been expanded relating to each vehicle. We're gathering more specific information, and we're gathering more precise information. And here's a great look at just work orders, the kind of what happened to this vehicle in one click. A couple clicks, you can see all the work orders that have happened in time with this vehicle. And here we are creating a work order. In this case, we're going to create a PM work order. And I talked about the specifics. We're getting specific based on like even PMs. We're PM light, 50K all the way up through. This is our XML changes, kind of representing some information here. We were able to bring in costs to fleet versus costs that fleet bills out right into the work order itself. In addition, every PM we're assessing the condition of the vehicle, and that in time is going to really feed into a vehicle replacement program and a scoring program. And we'll talk a little bit about that as the slides go by. Another goal of ours was to create reliable maintenance scheduling, as we've mentioned a few times, and to manage, and also to manage the daily cradle to grave data point gathering, which provided us with long-term perspective of our lifetime assessments of the vehicles and replacement predictions. We leveraged, as the bullet points are kind of showing, we leveraged GeoEvent Server to gather up-to-date odometer readings and dates from our fueling system. In addition, we utilize asset updates in Cityworks at the close of a work order. We're pushing the work order description into the GIS data, as well as the date of that particular service that happened. And then at the end of the day, we're taking these up-to-date data and we're utilizing SQL procedures to calculate the upcoming PM when that's going to happen. And so because we have this great reliable data in both the work order within Cityworks and in our GIS data layer, we can really leverage operational insights with confidence. And so at a high level, we're seeing summary statistics. These are key performance indicators that we felt were important. And then as a manager or a stakeholder can really dive into the details and get more information. We're even able to display information about specific mechanics / technicians. What do they tend to spend more time on? And then at a higher level, look at a whole shop, the heavy shop, the light shop. What kinds of work are they doing most often? Where are they spending the majority of their time? And because of this connection to outside sources, we're able to kind of tap into our fueling data and really show that as well. And here we are back in Cityworks, as you might expect. We're able to connect to a dashboard that we've created that really dials into what PMs have been done in the recent past and what PMs are upcoming, and this is getting back at that ability to schedule. The same information is viewable within Cityworks as a GIS data layer. Because we're saving everything back to that feature class, we can really sift for the department how many vehicles are upcoming for PMs and et cetera, and contact them as needed.
Sorry, Krista, end up playing.
That's okay. So we're getting another look.
Right.
And then in addition, it really starts, we spend a considerable amount of time scrubbing data, and we really want to keep it up to date. And so for us, starting at the level of when the county takes over a vehicle, we're really going to begin that process of bringing data in a efficient and consistent way. And so we've integrated a VIN lookup, and we're going to kind of go through. Of course, it started with paper, and then we took that information and we put it into an inspection within Cityworks. Things like included are like purchase date, purchase cost, the department or the division that is needing the vehicle, the fleet's assessment of the type of vehicle it is. And then at the end of the day, we're also the VIN. The VIN is a really important piece of this, and making sure that VIN is accurate. And then at the end of the day, this work order closes, and of course it's going to be written to the Cityworks database. We're using asset updates on the close, and so therefore our geodatabase and within our fleet vehicles is going to be updated as well. And then this is where we're using a Python script to connect to an open API that exists on the web to grab and decode the VIN information and bring it back into the fleet table. And really, when you saw that picture of the asset, you can really see how much detailed information we're collecting. We're collecting make, model, stuff like four-wheel drive versus, other stuff that I think is valuable hopefully is valuable to our fleet group.
Yeah, so some of the key points that we did during Enhancement is literally just cleaning up the data and scrubbing it. And then there's always a dynamic function and action manager and some of the scripts that we wrote that basically updates that data. So now that's scrubbed, but obviously we want to make sure it's well maintained. So really the main thing here is to standardize the vehicle information. It becomes a little bit more reliable data, the data that you can trust. You can start driving a lot of analysis and a lot of this KPIs. The geo-event service definitely helps out streamline that data, so we can actually pull examples like the odometer readings from the fuel information. We can actually grab that and push that to the GIS. And of course, that enables us to do any kind of analysis and analytics, predictive scheduling, maintenance, and also come up with this dashboard that our fleet operation uses. So what's next for us, our implementation? So we created this Survey 123 form that's actually ready to be deployed. So this is just kind of one of those daily safety pre-trip checklists that a staff can actually use using their mobile device to kind of check around the vehicle. So this is one of those opportunities. We can also grab odometer reading again, so update the GIS. So this kind of sample here, we can push that into the main system. There's also an API integration that we have that goes from the Survey 123 to the service request API. Should the operator needs to send a request to schedule a maintenance for that vehicle. Another one that we're working on is the VIN barcoding concept using the Cityworks mobile native app version 10. So we can actually scan the barcode or asset information, the VIN, QR code. You can also type in the actual, we'll call it the CV number, the county vehicle number, to search for that asset. So from the mobile device, it selects the asset. You can see the detail of the asset, and then it gives our service riders an ability to create work orders and inspections. So then the next biggest thing that we've actually ready to deploy, that we've been working on a lot, is our way to score a vehicle, meaning that kind of standardized cumulative scoring based on age, mileage, maintenance cost to that, and that sort of threshold. We like to be able to present this during budget season to say, hey, your vehicle is due for replacement. So some of the stuff that we actually leverage again into the inbox of Cityworks is to use the GIS searches to come up with what our vehicles that are over 7 years old, what vehicles are over the 150,000 miles threshold. So we can basically list that, and our fleet shop can actually do analysis and do reporting on this, and then to kind of come up with better ways of assessing their assets, their fleet. As simple as giving the record as far as which one is the critical vehicles that needs to be replaced and how many of those belong to each department. And again, at the same time, they can use this list to kind of provide for budgeting concepts. So the way we did this is we just basically added an additional fields in the GIS to kind of give us the age score from make and model, or the year model, and then today's date, and then mileage score, obviously, for any kind of odometer reading. So you have this cumulative score of 100. Anything that's below 59 will be the critical vehicles that needs to be replaced. So we're also using any of our existing reports right now that gives us this life cycle report, the status of the vehicle as far as how much maintenance we put into this vehicle, so they can use this report as well to do their planning for an upcoming budget cycle. So we've done a lot of enhancements into the GIS, to the Cityworks. So we felt like a lot of this was definitely worthwhile doing enhancement. Now I gotta stop this, hold on. Okay. So thank you for having us present our enhancements. I'd like this opportunity to thank my Public Works team, Krista, Stephanie, Tripp, Tim, who put a lot of effort into putting all this stuff together, all the data, and of course, our Cityworks team and Larry Celine and Brad Johnson helped us direct us the right path of how to approach the integration a little bit better, and of course our business partners with Jones Evans and Associates and GIS-centric CMMS for helping us some of this integration.
All right, next up, joining us from the city of Evansville is Logan Guffey. He's the facility asset manager there at Evansville Water and Sewer Utility in Indiana, as well as Tim Schomburg, who is the GAM and GIS and asset management consultant at Power Engineers. They will be talking about how Evansville has taken a unique approach to how they do facility area approach to asset maintenance. It's a unique way that they've are using Cityworks to be able to manage all their asset maintenance from a vertical approach. So Tim, we'll turn the controls over to you, and Logan, you're up.
City of Evansville, we serve a population around 120,000. It's been a relatively flat number the last several census cycles, so around about 120,000. We've got several departments utilizing Cityworks and GIS. We've been users for around a decade, but it's been a kind of slow, methodical implementation through our organization. We've really focused primarily on distribution and collection systems within Cityworks and the GIS, and we've recently been making a push to bring our vertical assets and our plant sites into the system as well. And I would be remiss if I gave any presentation where I didn't mention that the city of Evansville is home to the second largest street festival in the United States, second to Mardi Gras. So if you are in the Evansville area the first full week in October, go to the west side and enjoy a lot of fried food. So just a little background on the project, the work that Tim and his team and us here at EWSU have done. We had a lot of standalone systems when it came to asset management and with respect to vertical assets in particular. Our wastewater plant sites had a bit of a dated asset management system. Our water filtration plant had a different system than the wastewater plant, and we really didn't have a good way of aggregating all of that data together. A lot of the maintenance records were on paper and in a filing cabinet in the maintenance planner's office, which is not too terribly uncommon, but we wanted to get all of that data together so that we could start utilizing it to its full potential. We really wanted to chase after the single source of truth that is kind of the holy grail for everyone in this business. So we identified some needs where we wanted a comprehensive, authoritative system of information, and we wanted to be able to make decisions on a repeatable, sustainable basis. We didn't want to make a decision today and then question how we made it next week or next year. We wanted to bring all of this together and be able to plan for our future. So I'll turn that over to Tim to really get into the nuts and bolts of kind of how we tackled that.
Yeah, thanks, Logan. So as with many Cityworks implementations, the first step is to make some decisions about your GIS design and your GIS data that is going to be behind Cityworks. So at Evansville, there was one thing that we really had to take into consideration, and that was that this design that we were creating wasn't just going to be used for this project. There's going to be other uses, other configurations of Cityworks in the future that are going to use this same database. So we wanted to kind of think ahead so we didn't have to do more work down the road to make changes later. So this project specifically was focused on Evansville's wastewater treatment plants, as you can see the map on the right there. So we use the enterprise GIS approach to create a relational database that contained two feature classes. So one was sites, which is basically an equivalent to the parcels that Evansville owns, and then one was facilities. This mostly contained buildings, but there's a few areas, in the treatment plants that aren't technically a building, but there's still vertical assets inside of them. On the bottom right there, you can see the tunnels. That would be an example of that. And then we had 13, kind of a random number, 13 tables of equipment. We broke these tables out based on common terminology that was already used at Evansville, as well as some, industry standard trades. So electrical and HVAC and things like that. All of these tables then had a relationship back to the facility. So you can highlight a facility, such as the image here, maintenance administration building, and then you can see all of the related assets inside of that facility. When designing the actual tables, we had some standard fields across all of the tables. So something like the related facility ID, we needed that key identifier to relate back to the facility. Also a serves field. I was talking before, we might use this in the future for water treatment plants or lift stations. So we have a serves field in there that, tracks that these assets are specific to wastewater, not water. And then we had some asset specific fields. So for electrical, we want to track the voltage on electric assets. We also have an asset type field with unique domains for each table. So a domain, a drop down. So for HVAC, you can select that HVAC piece of equipment is an air handling unit, for example. Another key thing here, and I'll talk about this numerous times throughout this presentation, but we gathered all these requirements and did all this design on spreadsheets, a tool that's familiar to pretty much everybody. So we were, trying to put tools in the hands of the end users that they're familiar with. And then we just took those spreadsheets and plugged them into a Python tool that just built out the database. So in the long run, it saved us quite a bit of time on this project. All right, so now we got the GIS database built out. The next step was populating that. So Evansville had, multiple sources of information. One of them being Antero, their old asset management system. And so we pulled all this information out into spreadsheets and realized that it definitely needed some cleanup. So the Logan and the end user staff was nice enough to go through and do some data cleanup, and also assign, here you can see in the table above, assign an asset group and an asset type to every asset that corresponds with the GIS data. There was some inconsistency, so this really helped to define everything in a similar fashion before we loaded it into the GIS. Lastly, once again, like I said, we used automation, we used Python to just load this data from those spreadsheets directly into the corresponding GIS table. And it saved us a lot of time, so we didn't have to do any manual GIS editing. All right, so onto the big task. We now got the GIS database. The GIS database is populated with all this equipment data. And now we had to look at how do we want to design Cityworks. So we started by reviewing all of the previous work templates that were in Antero. As you can see there, after reviewing the data, we determined there was over 1,000 templates being used. So the reason for this was that they weren't simplified, they weren't consistent. So there might be a change oil in pump 1, change oil for pump 2. So there was a lot of templates that were really doing the same thing, but not necessarily defined the same. So we took some time, once again, with Logan's help, we scrubbed these spreadsheets and were able to, scrub the templates, and we're able to simplify it down to 78 work order and 65 inspection templates. That number seems like a lot still, and the reason for that is these are all cyclical inspections. So we wanted to include that cycle on the template so the user didn't have to change that when they're in there doing that work. So we might have a change oil annually, change oil monthly, change oil biannually. So they're really the same work activity. They're just defined as a different template. So lastly here, with the information from Antero, we found there was a ton of useful information in this system, but it was all put into one field a lot of the time. So specifically the supervisor that works for Evansville, he has so much information that he was logging in this system, and it included information about the assets. It included information about the work that he was specifically doing on that asset. And you can see an example here in the instructions. So, you know, he includes the type of filters to use, the type of oil to use, any tips and tricks. You know, sometimes he'll even include the wrench size that you need to take off bolts. So we wanted to maintain this data. There's not a good place to put something this descriptive in Cityworks unless we went through and parsed out every single instruction and pulled these into, you know, individual fields, maybe in the GIS. So what we did is we wrote a tool that basically grabbed all this information from the Antero data and created PDFs. So here's an example of one on the right, and this we have it organized in a way that you can click on, you know, go into a file structure, wastewater treatment plant west, facility building, and all the equipment with the associated PDF if there was this information for that asset. So now the end users are able to attach these PDFs to work orders, to inspections, to have that additional level of information when they go out to complete the work. All right, so a little bit on the Cityworks workflow that we went with. We went with a kind of a hybrid approach between Cityworks Office and Cityworks Mobile, being that Evansville was already using this. They already had the devices, so it made it pretty easy transition. So to talk through this diagram here on the right, the work is initiated, and we're actually going to be loading in all those first instances of the work orders and inspections into the system. So the supervisor then is going to submit that to a user out in the field or one of his staff. They're going to open up Cityworks Mobile, complete the work, and submit it back then to the supervisor for review. If he finds something, you know, isn't complete, he's going to submit it back to the user. They're going to mark it complete again once they're done, and it's going to be closed out by the supervisor. Once the supervisor closes that out, many of you probably know on a cyclical work order inspection, the child is created with that projected start date based on the interval of that cycle. So that'll be sitting in the inbox then ready for the next time it comes around. Now, one of the reasons that we did it this way was, you know, the staff have a job to do, and it's not their job to sit out there in the field on their device in Cityworks for 3 or 4 hours a day. They just go in, you know, look at what they have to do that day, mark them complete, and that's all they're really in the system. And then the supervisors and they're monitoring and making sure everything remains clean in there. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about this first lesson learned or summary of this project here. Project efficiency, you know, it was really important that Logan and management and the end users all were on board with this up front. They all knew what we were going to be doing, and that really helped us move this project along. They were excited about it, and there was great buy-in from everybody. But you know, one thing is there's always these tools at everyone's disposal that maybe aren't used as much. In this case, we used a lot of Python to move this project along. I think we completed the bulk of it in under 3 months. So it was a pretty quick project, even though there was a lot of activities being done throughout it. So Logan, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I like this. I let Tim handle all of the nitty gritty, and then I come in for the finish line. This works out really well. The biggest lessons learned or biggest advice that I can give is get your end users involved early and often. Building that ownership with the ladies and gentlemen that are going to be using this every day after the project is completed, it's just invaluable. And so we had the head of maintenance, we had him involved very early and often. Him and I would sit and comb through spreadsheets together and do some of this kind of data scrubbing. And that worked out really well, because now he feels like he's got a stake in the game, and he really wants to take this and run with it, rather than it being a tool that we developed and the end user doesn't necessarily want it. And then we also, like Tim mentioned before, we designed with the future in mind. We took an enterprise approach. So this project specifically was limited to our wastewater treatment plants, but we built it knowing that we were going to, at completion, take this and try to run with it towards our water plant, towards our lift stations, towards our booster pump and water towers. Any other vertical asset site within our utility, we want to take this concept and apply it to build out the entire system. So that's kind of what is next. We are scoping a project currently to basically validate all of the vertical asset data that we have within our GIS database. We want to go out and actually lay eyes on every vertical asset that we say that we own, and make sure that make, model, serial number, condition assessments, everything is completed. And then we want to, at fruition, we want to basically mirror this concept again and apply it to all of our different vertical asset sites. So whether that's treatment plants, whether they are certain asset types, this was kind of our pilot project. And now that we've seen success, we want to take this and run with it throughout the rest of the system. So that'll be a big lift. We're going to, while we're out there, we're going to be putting tags on every asset so we can come back and kind of have a little bit more streamlined functionality in the future. So we're really excited for that, and we're excited for the work that we've done already. It's working out very well, and we hope that we just keep running down that road.
Jumping forward here, we're gonna be talking to Christian Hernandez from Indio Water, and as we all have experienced, 811 services are critical to really that underground and buried utility assets and be able to manage those effectively. So Christian will be sharing with us how Indio Water is using Cityworks and DigAlert to streamline the call before you dig services that they have in California. So Christian, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chip. So today's talk, we're going to cover the background of Indio Water Authority and how we're leveraging our investment in Cityworks, how we expanded our Cityworks call before you dig solution, the management of these DigAlert service requests once they come in for our field staff, and the successful reporting of those DigAlert service requests to our customers. And in addition to that, the KPIs that management is using to work on those service requests and the benefits. So the Indio Water Authority, our population is 90,000 residents, and we have a little over 24,500 customer service accounts. The Indio Water Authority was formed as a joint power authority in 2000 to deliver water to the city of Indio. Our approximate service territory is 38 square miles. The groups that use Cityworks range from our water conservation, customer service, engineering, and operations group. Our operations group houses our production units, distribution, backflow department, and valve turning crews. We've been a Cityworks customer since 2014, but we've been an Esri customer as well a little over a decade now. We're known here in Southern California as the city of festivals. Some of the headlining festivals that we have in our area range from the Coachella Music and Arts Festival and the big Stagecoach Country Festival. So very fun to attend. So if you haven't, please do so. So leveraging our existing Cityworks investment, complying with California's Electronic Positive Response EPR mandate. So the state of California in 2017 mandated that organizations that install and manage underground infrastructure notify excavators, contractors, developers of the status of these tickets. And we had an existing solution already that we were using in Cityworks that was basically taking dig tickets that were being sent to us via email. We have a Python script that would then parse those out and bring those into the Cityworks environment. Well, we knew that we wanted to take advantage of that still, and leverage that capability. So part of the mandate also in the state of California is the two regional bodies that govern the management of the 811 DigAlerts are 811 North and 811 South. They also had to mandate, and they created a REST URL page that we would post our responses in the form of a JSON, and then from there would notify the customer of the electronic positive response that it was successfully done out in the field. So expanding our Cityworks call before you dig solution. So we were using that already to manage the request, and we wanted to expand our solution to handle the EPR, as well as continue to track our status and labor costs associated with it. So our friends at Axon Geospatial, formerly GIS-Sync, helped us to do that. They helped us with leveraging the universal custom fields that would capture the response based off the status, right? So the status being the complete field was being used as the trigger that would go ahead and populate that. One of the things the reason why we decided to use the complete field is that all of our field responses are done via the Cityworks mobile app in iOS. So using that was critical to making sure that the responses were coming in from the field, and then also in addition to that, that the actual responses were being answered by our field, meaning the custom fields that were created for that would basically, our end user would then populate the clear if there was any conflicts, and then they modified our script to go ahead and push those responses out to 811. So from there, part of what was done was revamping our inboxes to basically look at open unassigned tickets and looking at the various responses that were needed to be done by the field, meaning in the body of the email responses from DigAlert, there are requirements. As an example of if a customer needs to do a meet and mark out in the field, that our field staff is aware of it so they can meet the customer out. If it's an emergency response, so they need to respond to those within a certain time frame, and then any other types of comments or information that needs to be answered out in the field for that. So the successful reporting of the DigAlert service requests. So one of the things that our field staff had to get used to doing is making sure that the response was basically captured and sent over to DigAlert USA. Now, the ticket status in our inbox, we had these codes that were filtered out so that our end users could see that the response was okay. And what you're looking at is all the possibilities of the possible results from DigAlert. And then from there, if anything failed from the response, then our crews would then notify the customer of if there was an issue or for whatever reason. Part of what USA did was the customers and the public, they could view the responses as well through a REST URL, a URL page where they could see the responses coming in from whatever utility that was being done, marking at their location. So what you're seeing here is that page, and then when they pull up the ticket number, and here's the response from USA. Well, and in this case, in our case, Indio Water Authority. So from there, the KPIs that management wanted to see were the status of open tickets, completed tickets, and what was closed in the last 30 days. So we were leveraging our ArcGIS enterprise to basically show those dashboards and show the KPIs. What you're looking at on the right-hand column are the various service requests, labor costs assigned to, and on the lower KPI, you're looking at service requests by priority completed within the last 30 days. In there, as they select the various request priority, it's basically cross filters within our ArcGIS dashboard. And then from there, In the center here, you're looking at the location of these DigAlert requests with a expression built in to bring up the service requests within Cityworks. So some of the benefits that we've seen: increased productivity in the number of requests being completed. What we're seeing now is an increase in the volume of tickets, and has increased by over 50%. We're a little past this fiscal year, and we've also seen an increase as far as labor because of the increased amount of tickets and the decrease in incidents of our assets being damaged out in the field, and the improved customer service. Before, it was a manual process to notify the customers. Now it's all digital, and that was a big deal for us. So one of the other things that I didn't mention in the presentation is that going in the future is we're in the middle of selecting our vendor for our UN implementation that we're going to be integrating our Cityworks platform with.
I wanted to bring Becky in to our conversation, as she and her team have been, and our development team have been working on the latest Cityworks enhancements and functionality, and there's a lot coming. So Becky, I know that you're traveling today, so we appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me, everybody. So as a disclaimer before we get started, I do have to say that everything here that is getting ready to be presented is all future-facing information. It is subject to change, and as such, there cannot be any contracts or promises made in terms of the delivery of the functionality that's being presented. So with that, I did want to just discuss going into this. I started compiling what we wanted to really hit on as part of the upcoming releases and new functionality that will be coming soon with the next release of Cityworks. And there were some major themes here. There's actually a lot of new functionality and new capabilities that are coming. As an example, my team has given updates to the sales team and the account management teams in the last couple of weeks, and those meetings have run between 2 to 3 hours, just to give them a flavor of everything that's going to be coming. For the purposes of today, I have it kind of boiled down to 12 minutes here, so I'm just trying to keep it to the highlights and make sure that some of these major points are made aware. And then hopefully you guys will have a chance to really dive into the release notes and the announcements once all that's made available. So with that, there's a lot of new enhancements to the GIS in terms of the functionality and the integrations with Cityworks and what that means in relation to the platform. We're also opening up now for the first time with extensibility across the HTML5 apps, starting with Respond, and I'll get into that a little bit more. The level of capability and functionality that's coming through now with inventory management, with Storeroom, and then overall the user experience. Let me see here. There we go. Oops, went too far. I'm sorry, I'm not. There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. So I'm going to go ahead and start off here with the GIS. And one of the biggest things that we have coming to the platform and with the JavaScript Forex Viewer, which is, again, just a reminder, that's the map viewer that's available across Respond, Operational Insights, OpX, and those other HTML5 apps. With the JavaScript Forex API that's available there, we're now able to provide a full 3D context within Cityworks. So with that, we're providing support for ArcGIS scene viewers in 3D. There is functionality there to actually display all of your Cityworks activities with a Z level for tracking, so actually a 3D representation of your work activities in Cityworks, and the ability to dynamically switch back and forth between 2D and 3D depending on that user and their workflow and where they're actually, how they're interacting with the data at that time, and being able to support a dynamic experience there. And so with that, I have just a quick video that kind of goes through and shows an example. And this is actually taken from Cityworks Respond, and it's showing that functionality and that view of that 3D data. And with that, we've actually brought in and incorporated a number of the out-of-the-box widgets that Esri provides for 3D visualization and the scene support here. And so you can see there's ability here to start getting into some of the items such as, shading and daylight. This is important to represent and to give that full context for the 3D in terms of the value that 3D brings to your organizations. But if you're thinking, in terms of like 3D for PLL and community development, understanding how a new development that's coming into the community, how that starts to affect shading, visibility for other surrounding existing developments are already in place, and having that something that can be viewed here from the back office pretty simply and quickly. And then being able to also bring in some of that other information that we have here as well from Nearmap. So some of this data that you're seeing here is being brought in from a business partner. And this is the type of stuff that we wanted to really highlight because we know that not every organization has 3D data just available to them today. But there's a number of other resources that are available to help support that process and start to build out that 3D data, to take the information that's coming from organizations like Nearmap or best practices from Esri, and that we can also assist with, to take some of that information and start to extrude existing data in the 2D world into a 3D context. And so as I zoom through here, you can just start to see we have the overlay of the utility features. There's also information that's being shown here in terms of Cityworks activities that are being represented in 3D, and that's all something that's coming soon. And we're pretty excited about it. It really starts to lay the foundation for a lot of the work that we have been doing in terms of vertical assets and being able to get into some of that functionality as well for indoors, getting an integration with ArcGIS Urban, which I'll be talking about in a little bit as well. As well, when we start to look at the GIS, we also are now able to have subtype support. And this is really relevant. You know, I was so excited because I heard those last two presentations where there was discussion about the process to actually start going to the utility network. And that's something where the subtype support is critical. And it's something that is critical for the utility network functionality and configuration for our customers. It's also something that's providing more value for our customers, even beyond utility network. So this is allowing us to actually natively read those utility network feature services, bring in that information and start to associate those subtypes and subtype groupings as part of the information that's being tracked for the asset definition and the way that the information is being tracked there through the service layers and flowing down through Cityworks, so we can start to have, you know, all the full functionality of Cityworks applied against those groupings and subtypes within the system, searching capabilities, map representation, having that full support across the application. So I'm hoping, you know, this will come out and those groups like Indio and Evansville, as they start to move to the utility network, you know, we can have another round of Converge where we can start to see how they've been adopting this and bringing that functionality from Cityworks in as part of their implementations. And then in terms of where things are headed, there's a lot of work going on currently in relation to the GIS within Cityworks. You know, we do focus on being GIS-centric, and it's something that is never done. We're always bringing in new functionality from Esri, as well as extending the functionality that we have for our users. So there's work being done currently to bring some of those 3x tools over to the 4x context. And you can see here, some of these are tools that we had available during the Silverlight days, such as a heat map, and we didn't necessarily have it in the 3x map currently in Office. And being able to bring those over and actually provide those again back in the 4x map is something that, you know, a lot of customers have been looking forward to. We're also going to be introducing some new widgets because of the new functionality we're providing along the lines of 3D and the UN. So being able to have those 3D widgets there for, you can see here the Slice widget, Building Explorer, actually getting into some of the redlining and editor snapping, but then also with the utility network trace tool, incorporating that in our 4x map to provide users with a seamless context and experience so that they can actually go through and perform that utility network tracing within the Cityworks map, select the assets such as valves. If there's a water main break and they need to shut down services, having that all available to create those work orders immediately and just stay within that single context to perform that entire workflow. And so I mentioned extensibility. You know, we've been looking for a while at a way to actually provide some of that functionality that we had in Office that we had to, you know, move away from due to security vulnerabilities with the JavaScript injection. And with that, with the HTML5 apps, we're introducing extensibility. So this will be something that can be configured in the Style app, and it can allow organizations to actually go ahead and bring in extensibility into the forms and designate, you know, where on the form this is going to be located, how it will be accessed. And so an example, one of the most common workflows that we've seen in terms of the request for this is in relation to attachments as part of the permitting workflow. So being able to directly from Cityworks Respond, go through and upload attachments as part of a PLL permit application review process. And being able to take those attachments, whether they're pictures that are taking place from inspections out in the field, plans that are being submitted, and immediately launch them into a document management system, such as one of our partner applications like OnBase, and having that flow through directly from Cityworks. And the user doesn't have to, you know, log out, log into another application, run screens side by side or any of that. It's just a continuous screen and one experience for those users. As well, we've made a lot of improvements to Query Editor. And this covers, in terms of getting into more of the type of fields that can be searched upon and what fields can actually be returned in those results. And so what you can see here is actually the incorporation now for those custom fields that are taking place as part of the work order, service request, and inspection processes, as well as also searching against costing information. And then you can see here as well on the response side, what fields are actually now available, that expansion of the fields that are available to be returned in those results to create those queries that are then populating those dashboards. And then as well, kind of expanding upon that, the addition of PLL custom fields to respond. So being able, as you can see here, to go through and specify in the admin app, new custom fields that are tied to payment, and then actually the exposure, how those are actually being exposed through the actual application there on the make payment screen here. So there's a number of new capabilities that are coming through with PLL. Again, I can't fit everything into the time frame that we have here. We will be running a webinar series after the next release to really start to dive into more of that functionality, but this will all also be available through release notes and the documentation that we'll be providing. So this is just some examples of the roadmap and what is to come still with Respond. There's a lot of focus going into expanding Respond and creating more functionality there, providing some of those capabilities that we had in Office and making sure that those are being brought over to Respond to close some of those functionality gaps. And then with Storeroom, there's been a number of significant enhancements to Storeroom. And some of the biggest ones, you can see those items here. These are things that we've been hearing from customers in terms of, damaged material tracking. When damaged materials come in as part of a requisition, being able to identify those, being able to actually have that information taken back to the vendor and actually being able to do the correct financial auditing and tracking as part of that process. Directly opening work orders from the Storeroom dashboard. So based off of queries that are being generated with those work order search results, being able to click those links and immediately launch a work order from Storeroom and having that, again, be a single experience for those users. They're not jumping back and forth between different apps, and the system's taking care of what data is being presented. So one of the big ones that I actually want to go ahead and highlight here is in relation to the serialization. And so you can see here, there's a few screen captures I took just in terms of some of that functionality. On the left-hand screen capture, you can see as part of that configuration, we actually have the ability to go through and upload from a CSV and bring in all the serialization information that's being provided for new materials coming into the storeroom. So this could be valves, it could be chemicals, it could be pumps, any type of asset that's coming in, any type of inventory or material that's coming into the storeroom can then be serialized. The benefit of this is, as you can see on the following screen capture as well, the ability to now track the warranty date, expiration date, all tied back to a specific serial number. This is laying the foundation for more functionality to come. So along the way for the roadmap, now that we have the serialization in place, we're actually able to start taking it into a process where we can go through and be tracking from that material as it comes into a storeroom from a requisition, comes into the storeroom, is issued out to a truck, issued from a truck to a work order, and then from a work order is actually installed in the field and becomes an actual asset. We can do that conversion in the future from inventory into an asset in the GIS and being able to backtrack to identify if that asset fails in the field, where did it originate within the whole supply chain process and being able to track that information back to the actual vendor. So this is really exciting for us. It's kind of, that whole extension of being a GIS-centric application in terms of tracking how these materials actually play a part in the workflow process and then become part of the asset management process. And this is just a screenshot showing, again, for those damaged materials, this is one of those workflows that was critical for a lot of the storeroom managers that we were working with, and being able to track the damage quantity and then having that returned back to the vendor and not included as part of that financial process for the auditing for the materials coming into that storeroom. And then as we start to get into some of the UI enhancements that have been made, where we're really starting to see some of that take place is in relation to the native apps. So I wanted to highlight here some of the items that you'll actually see. One item off the bat is in terms of the native apps, and we know that there's a lot of locations there, such as the submit to fields, supervisor assignments, where there's a lot of scrolling that's taking place due to the number of employees that might be listed there to make that assignment process. Now we're able to actually go through and do an autofill and do a dynamic filter search. So as we start typing in the first few letters of a name, any part of that name, or if we actually use the speak and the voice audio option, being able to actually filter down that list automatically and have a smaller group that's actually being used for the results that are being populated there. So just trying to ease that field process so there's not so much scrolling down on panels and pages. And then as well, extending the functionality in the native apps to incorporate part of what we already have available in Respond and Storeroom. So being able to capture those signatures out in the field as part of the inspection process. And then extending those user enhancements into public access. So one of the new items that will be coming with public access is the ability to configure guided access. And so this will be taking place on the admin side, and users can go through and identify where they want to provide feedback to residents and contractors as they're going through and populating the pages in public access and identifying what pieces of information are critical, giving more context for what type of attachments need to be included, and essentially providing a step-by-step interface to really make sure that as citizens and contractors are going through the application process, they're aware of all the requirements to make sure that that process and that submittal can be completed. And then as well, moving into integration with ArcGIS Urban. And so this is something that we've been talking about for a while. We've completed the integration and we're starting to work with a few customer sites here to start to look at how that data actually starts to play within their environments and what some of the parameters are that need to be passed back and forth and refining it. But this gives us another option here to have a way to have a 3D data set brought in as part of that development process, and then actually visualized within the context of the current community, current development in buildings, bringing that information in 3D and looking at the effects of it as part of that plan review process. And I think that's it. And so those were some of the top highlights that we wanted to make sure to hit.
First and foremost, I just want to thank Jessica for being here, the brains of the organization by far. Secondly, Cityworks for letting us present, but more importantly, the city of Philadelphia. I mean, they really went all in on this, and it was a very worthwhile effort, true benefits, and we want to go through some of that today. If there are more questions, feel free to get a hold of either one of us. Now, there's statistics on this page, there's numbers, but I think the thing that's very important to take into account, two components. One, you notice how many street trees there are. Second part of that is the pits. Now, when you look at an urban forest, it's very important to not only what's there, but what could be there. And when I say pits, there are an awful lot of empty tree pits in a city, or they maybe have a stump in them, or maybe they want to develop them. But every city is under an effort right now to green infrastructure. A lot of canopy coverage going on, especially in terms of equality across zip codes, for lack of a better term. Trees, when we think about them as an asset, and John from Woolpert, when you come back, just so you know, they are GASB eligible. Okay, so that's just something I want to mention to you. Trees typically get what? Planted, they grow, they get pruned, depending upon where they're planted. If they're planted in the right spot, asplund doesn't have to come and do a huge cut, but they can be pruned appropriately. They die and they're removed. A street tree in the city in an urban setting has a lifespan of about 25 years, roughly. So that tells you the turnover. First of all, they have a canopy spread of approximately 144 square feet. So if you take that, put that into acres, put that into miles, and look at it in the context of somewhere like Philadelphia, you will see how much they have and what they might need. Storm and emergencies are very important. There's a time during the year between, say, June and August in the Mid-Atlantic where a tree just falls. There's no wind, there's no accident. It's called just tree drop. It'll fall. Sometimes it might fall at 3 in the morning. That means somebody has to come and clear the road, usually a park Philadelphia Park member, or there are emergencies that come through, which we treat as projects. And one came through in November. I didn't think we were ready, but we did. That created the Emergency Operations Center. It's like being in Men in Black. Everybody's talking to each other. At the end, they aggregated all the costs and they were reimbursed by FEMA because we tracked the tree-related costs for PPR. So a lot of activity going on, a lot of things that we can talk about for ages, but we don't have time. Bottom left shows you 3 tree districts. There are 5, 3 park districts. There are 5 tree districts, each treated and costed separately. In the middle are the over 400 and some thousand backlog activities. The city has a lot of backlog. They have 125,000 trees to be removed. They get funded to take away 70. So there's a big backlog over time. And finally, the inbox, which we used a lot for the CSRs, inspectors, arborists, it came in very, very handy. Boom. Secondly, challenges. Anybody on the call who works or is associated with a park and or recreation division or department, recreation will get some funds. You have gyms, you have playgrounds, you have pools. Parks, you're not going to get any money whatsoever, okay? Mow the lawn, pick up the trash, trim the trees so somebody doesn't poke out their eye. That's about it. So there's a lack of funding associated with parks that has to be overcome. Cityworks is a great way to start to benchmark that, measure it, to make a case for money. Complex workflow. Believe me, you can sit here and say a park tree and a street tree, hey, not a big deal. This should be simple. No, there are a lot of decisions, funding. It's a very complex. Jess can tell you that for sure. Street and park trees are treated differently. It's a different story, how they maintain it, how they track costs, how they do things. And finally, I just want to make a point here for everybody on the call, and some people know more than others what I'm talking about. Contract management is a very important component of many activities that take place within any organization. City of Philadelphia, 90% of their prune and remove work is operational capital funding. Trees are planting is capital funding, a little bit of a different source, but they all have line items. They all have different costs based upon size. Those costs can change annually based upon a CPI. So if you want to do anything that everybody's going to love, batch update line items for a contract, and you're going to have a lot of friends. Second, we already have a lot of friends, but a lot of heroes. Secondly, opportunities. We had an entire inventory. Cyclomedia flew the city leaf on in about 2017. So we had all the points we needed. The end users, they were of that demographic, 28 to 38. They get the technology. iPad's not a big deal. You didn't have to tell them how to use a mouse, okay? Worked real well. A lot of support from the city, many departments in the city, but in particular city geo, because we need a lot of GIS data, features, services, etc. We couldn't have gone forward. We couldn't have done a lot of the work we did without them. And then finally, with the go forward plan, this is what do they want to do next? Upgrade, collectors going away, field. How do we make dashboards for managers so they don't make 17 phone calls before somebody goes out to trim a tree on the Broad Street run? A lot of different ways to look at this. Boom. So solution, just want to mention a few things about this. Parks was the first AWS deployment in Philadelphia. Cloud was the big thing. Hey, let's do the cloud. This is going to be great. Okay, 4.5 years later, there's a lot of things we're having to take into consideration as a result of that. We did go down the, hey, mobile, respond, went mobile. Just so you know, this is back in about 2019, 2020. An important decision that we can obviously revisit. There were some contract workarounds we have to do, business processes. From the moment somebody calls a CSR, hey, I got a problem, till it's done, that can take a long time, permits, etc. A lot of reports, Jess can talk about that. A lot of great crystal reports that were put together. Then finally, from a staff standpoint, they had transition. For the same transition, there is an expansion going on underway about how people can use it. So being able to retrofit or retfit the end result for a certain user is very important. All right, Jess, gotcha. Sorry. I did my best to keep it light. Okay.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. And then finally, with the benefits, this is one thing I did want to mention, is that they now have a current idea of what's going on. They can make a case for new equipment. They can make a case for new staff. This is actually a very good thing for them to be more proactive. Secondly, I just want to mention with trees, there are the canopy, the CO2 sequestration, the water runoff retention. This is now can be used by the water department for some modeling. It can be used by the street department for when they either re-landscape and or have to rip out trees and figure out where to put them. Compliance, regulatory, John, you'll get to it in a second, but GASB, this can be used for capital expenditure. FEMA, reimbursement. There are going to be other things that will come up for permit grants, etc. But this will be a real benefit and provide a lot of, unique and actual numbers and figures. Go ahead, Jess. What do we got? They now know what they have. They had their inventory was like 7 years old. They thought they had a 4-inch. They thought they might have had a 4-inch, honey locust. It's a 17-inch different type of tree. So it's current. They can be proactive. A citizen can call and say, hey, can you come here? They can look at the system now and say, hey, for God's sake, you called 2.5 weeks ago. We were just out there. So they can start making better decisions. ISI and the PMI down at the bottom, this whole concept of probability and consequence can play itself into urban forest. An old dead tree has a high probability of failure, and basically the consequence, it falls on an arterial that's in front of a fire station and nobody can get out. This can be used and be very good. And then KPIs, and now my friend you.
Okay, thanks, Peter. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the technical side of our implementation with parks. Like Peter mentioned, we did weigh the mobile options. At the time, we had Cityworks Mobile and Respond, and we found that based upon the need for the simplified interface, which obviously you can accomplish with Respond and Style, but Parks was already using the Esri Collector app a bit. So being able to incorporate that in the mobile configuration was really ideal, and it really got us even closer with getting that end user acceptance, because we've started with this familiar interface. So I'm going to go ahead and step through this video here. So we had a couple things that we had to configure just specific to the park's needs. One in particular were the need for dynamic, not so much dynamic, but robust event layers. The mobile app by default will show you the work that's submitted to the user currently logged in. But with these guys, they needed to be able to go out and see not just their work, but also what's taking place around them. So am I about to go visit a tree that's already slated for contract work? Well, we don't want to do additional work if it's not required. And then the same with removal and pruning inspection. You don't want to put the effort into removing a tree or pruning a tree that's slated for removal. So we needed some additional layers involved to really let them do their work the way that they needed to. And then, like I mentioned, the ability to interface here with Collector, that was key to getting that acceptance. And there were a few configuration considerations we had to make, because at the time, this function here to auto filter text was not available in mobile. Really happy to see what Becky showed, because that is clutch. especially in this case, like you can see here, we're dealing with trees, obviously. So there's hundreds of tree names. And when you parse it out by species and genus and tree, I mean, the list just goes on forever. So at the time, we did end up deciding to put that in the GIS, which really, I mean, it's an attribute of the asset, so it probably belongs there. But at the time, we kind of had to do that because that autofilter function wasn't available yet. One other customization that we did was for homeowner information. So when the staff are out in the field, either communicating with the person that maybe placed a request, they want to know that who the homeowner is and who they should be speaking with when it comes to decision making. Additionally, they have some leave behinds that they may fill out in the field, and they need to know who needs to be on that form. Ultimately, the homeowner is the only one that can make decisions when it comes to requests for planting and things like that. A renter can't make that decision. Okay. And like Peter mentioned, we did explore the contract line items for parks, but based upon their needs, it just really wasn't a good fit at the time. We still use contracts, we still use, all of the attributes associated with contracts themselves, but just not the line items. We really needed the ability to batch update across many work orders. So what we did instead is we created line items out of materials, essentially. We didn't necessarily, I wouldn't say we repurposed materials, because you could still use these materials or use materials in the traditional sense, but we created material line items, and they're named according to district, asset, action, type of action, repair, remove, prune, plant, this kind of thing, and then your cohort. And the nice thing about Philly is that each district, each park district or tree district has one contractor working within that district. So we don't have a scenario where we have to average contractor rates across a district. We can update districts unique to whatever that contractor has adjusted their rate to. So for us, that worked really well. And we're able to track that actual cost, and using ELM here in the next screen. There it goes. There's a little advanced button here that takes a minute. Okay, so using ELM, and specifically ELM here, we had to use because the regular material function in Office would not allow batch update at the time. So ELM was critical in this workflow. And here what we're doing is just selecting several work orders from the inbox. You could do the same thing if you were running an ad hoc search, or from an actual save search along that. But ultimately, the process of selecting many work orders, opening an ELM, and then by going to add contractor cost, we can add the number of line items required on one work order, and those will get applied to all the work orders. So what I mean here is, like, if we say we need one of these materials added, it's not going to take that one unit and spread it across 12 work orders. It's going to apply one unit to each work order selected. And I just think that's an important distinction to make. It's kind of even more user-friendly. Okay, back to you, Peter.
Yeah, I think, and first of all, just going back to Jess, what we came up with, and I say we in like, bizarre work, married we, came up with, Jess, that was like fantastic. You know what I mean? That served the purpose of what we're looking for. And it's very complex because, as Jess mentioned, every district has a different cost per cohort depending upon the work. Center City, it's going to take a lot more to take down a 24-inch dead tree than it is in the far reaches of a more suburban community. So a lot of changes in dynamic. Lessons learned here, basically, I think the fact of, is Workflows, really making sure we get the workflows both at a high level and then boil them down. The ones below are for like emergency and non-emergency, storm and events we had to take a handle on. Workflow, hands-on approach. We had we had the park employees and the street employees along with us every step of the way. So we made a mistake, they watched us, we said, whoops, we made it. Sometimes they came up with a solution. When you have them as part of the discussion, it's great. I have to be honest with you, being a landscape architect, understanding what they're talking about, having done this before, helps a tremendous amount. Now, it doesn't help on the technical side, but when you're talking about certain terminology, it's a tremendous thing, but it also allows us to be, not only an advocate, but be, educated, as well as have them sort of accept change when they understand if you can speak the same language. Demonstrate at the right level. We came up to the division, the commissioners, the managers. That was a much different presentation than we would do to the new end users who are going to be using this from soup to nuts. So there's lessons learned, and also knowing that there's always a tomorrow. Trees grow, trees appreciate, and there's a lot of technology and tools that keep coming, but also how can we leverage Cityworks, as best as possible. Next thing is there's a strategic plan coming up. Community Forest is looking at how to be equitable in terms of tree canopy coverage. And I guarantee you that when you look at the city right now and where you see there is deforestation and there is a lack of tree coverage, there's a high coincidence between certain types of zip codes. More or less. And then finally, we want to help them continue and refine. We kind of left this saying we're done phase 2 and 3. Now it's time to turn the screws. You don't walk away and everything's tight. Let's start turning the screws to make sure it works. Then we can move forward in much more sort of like a larger informed step. Anyway, that's it. The next one's the questions. I can't emphasize enough the role Jessica played on this. I thank you tremendously. The role of Philadelphia and their willingness to have input in the meetings we had, large meetings that we had very frequently, and as well as Cityworks here, your guys' role in supporting us here. So thank you all for the time and the effort.
All right. As you all know, it's been in the media for years, actually, on Capitol Hill, and really this infrastructure conversation has been in the news now for the last year easily, heavily, and meaningful effort is really now is happening around how we can improve our communities and the infrastructure. And so these bills and packages that have been coming across have the potential to create the opportunity for funding at the local level and for our utilities. And so John is here to help us understand a little bit better how to access that funding here in the short term and in the long term. So John?
We're here to talk about today is some of the couple of infrastructure spending bills that have been passed in the recent couple of months here, and are bringing really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to municipal governments and state governments across the country to invest in infrastructure. And to give you a sense as to the size and scope of these bills, so I brought with me my dog-eared copy of War and Peace. This book is one of the longest books ever written, and if you listen to this one on the audiobook, it would take 61 hours to get through it. You would need 3 of these books to match the size of the page count for the 2 bills that we're going to discuss today. So it's a pretty significant amount of information that we're going to boil down into 15 minutes or so. But I wanted to take a moment just to kind of introduce myself a little bit in this way. I'm Director of Government Affairs and Chief Local Strategist for Woolpert. We're an AE&G, meaning Architect, Engineering, and Geospatial company. And aside from managing our Washington, D.C. office and our political team across the country, I really specialize in helping our clients align their needs with funding resources and helping match policy priorities from the local level up to the national level, and assist with compliance, regulatory, and reporting requirements. And together with our partners like Trimble and Cityworks, and our engineering team and our geospatial team, we're able to deliver a little bit of turnkey solutions, which is especially important considering the federal funding opportunities that we're seeing today, and that really, as you'll see in the timeline in a moment, we need to access this money now, frankly. So let's see here. This chart explains how these two bills became law. And oops, I went backwards. Let me go forward one there. I'm just learning the keypad. Okay, so how did the American Rescue Plan Act become into being here? Pardon me for a second. Okay, so the ARPA bill. This is the American Rescue Plan. It passed and became law in March of last year. This is $1.9 trillion of stimulus money, of which $350 million goes to every state and every local government in the country. And it comes in most of the time in two tranches of money. One tranche of money came last May, and the second tranche is supposed to come this May. And as we'll see in a moment, this bill had a guidance from the United States Treasury Department, which was finalized just in the recent couple of weeks. So we should start to see some pickup in the spending here. And what I think is important for folks to understand is how these bills work, right? So Congress, of course, passes the bill and the president signs it into law. In the case of ARPA, the United States Treasury is tasked with administering the funding, right? Which makes sense because they are able to deposit money into every state and local government in two tranches, in most cases in two tranches of funding. And then they provide the U.S. Treasury eligibility direction to the state and local governments on how they're able to spend the money. And as we'll learn in the most recent final rule, infrastructure, broadly speaking, is an eligible expense. And we'll go into some of the details of that in a moment. It's also important to understand the feedback mechanism, right? Where does the rubber hit the road here? So state and local governments, if they intend to spend the money, must report that back to the U.S. Treasury, and they must tell them that they're going to spend it, how they're going to spend it, and how they're following the guidelines provided by Treasury. What has been a little bit frustrating for some of the recipients of the ARPA money is that U.S. Treasury doesn't necessarily give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down on your eligible projects. They provide the guidance and expect that you're going to follow those, but they also expect that you're going to spend the money. This is a stimulus bill after all. Okay, so that's a little bit of the flow chart of the American Rescue Plan. The second infrastructure bill and the pure infrastructure bill, the first one in fact passed by Congress since 2004, and by far the largest infrastructure bill ever passed at $1.2 trillion, is the infrastructure law. It's now actually called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the bill. Okay, so Congress passed it and President Biden signed it into law in November. And in this case, the money is being distributed almost like a budget, a normal budget process, to almost every federal agency. And then the federal agencies are essentially supersizing existing programs, and they are providing certainty for funding over the next 5 fiscal years, starting with FY22. So a fiscal year in the federal world is October to October. So FY22 through FY26, right? And then the federal agencies with their new supersized programs with certainty going out for 5 fiscal years are spending the money in the normal way that they do, either direct federal procurement out of Washington, D.C. or regional offices, federal grants, and or allocations to states, such as transportation formula grants and things like that. Where's the rubber hit the road here with the feedback mechanism? it is that and this is very important, the federal agencies every fiscal year have to report back to Congress and provide a spending plan for how they're going to spend their infrastructure law money. Okay, that's very important because we're going to see a year in and year out change to that policy, right? What a particular agency might spend their money on in this fiscal year is very likely to change in the next fiscal year. And this gives you a little bit of the windshield wiper effect that we see in Washington when parties change, the House or the Senate changes parties, for example. Okay. Trying to get to the next slide. Okay. So an in-vein effort would be an attempt to try to chase each of these pots of money with your project. There are, you could do a drop down menu here for each of these pots of money, and below it you would find multiple dozens of subcategories. In each one of these, in each subcategory, has its own rules and regulations by which they have to live, by their own timeline, their own funding amount, and that's where the war and peace of the matter gets it. They have to. That's why it's so many pages long. It's just so much information. So I see a lot of articles attempting to try to guide people towards a certain pot of money, and I think that's a little bit of the reverse way of looking at it. I think you should take your project and your needs and put those up on the whiteboard and then align them with the available money, right? And that's been our strategy at Woolpert. Infrastructure law, so the infrastructure bill timing, like I said before, it's 5 fiscal years, FY22 to FY26. And as I described, there are all sorts of reporting requirements, but what's important to recognize here at the front end is that Congress gave agencies, again, depending on the category, either 60, 90, or 180 days to report their first spending plan. So if you look at November 15th as the day that the bill became law, and you extrapolate 60, 90, 180 days, you realize we're right in the middle of that time frame. So you're starting to see some of these agencies spend the money, which is a good news. Okay, going back to ARPA. So this is back to ARPA. We just talked about infrastructure bill. Now we're coming to ARPA again. And there is a new rule. This is the final guidance document that the federal government has provided municipalities and state governments on how they can spend their ARPA money. And this was released on January 6th, so very recently, and goes into effect on April 1st. And I've given just some highlights here that I thought were applicable to the audience of eligible activities. So they're far and wide. But I do highlight here government services, because new in the guidance provided in January 6th is that every state and local, every recipient of ARPA, frankly, can choose either to do a formulaic method to show revenue loss due to the pandemic, or they can just simply raise their hand and take $10 million. And the $10 million can be utilized for government services. And government services covers a wide array of activities and eligibilities, including infrastructure, data services, and on and on. It's practically anything that the government provides, from traffic to healthcare to parks and recreation, can be, you can use this 10 million of what you might consider kind of free $10 million on those types of activities. So ARPA is getting a very strong look now, maybe getting some people off of the snide, so to speak, so that they can start spending the money. This is the stimulus side of the effort here from the federal government. So they're really enticing people to try to spend some money. And here's some of those government services. I think you can read this here. Police, fire, public safety, schools, education, environment, health services. I mean, this is right from the law, quoting what that $10 million can be utilized for. So I've talked to many clients and have been to several conferences since this rule came out on January 9th, and I strongly believe that and have seen and am working with clients that are using this $10 million for everything from water resources to roads and bridges to social services. Okay, and again, when you look at the where the rubber hits the road here, so what are your obligations as a municipal government or state? Is, you know, essentially here's how you report up to the U.S. Treasury. So if you get the $10 million, this is where everybody really should be right now. You have to give a written justification, provide receipts, if you will, and really have a robust reporting and tracking. And I think that's a little bit where Cityworks comes in, right? Is making sure that you have your data available and you have the information you need for reporting at hand. And there is, frankly, a narrative side to this as well. And I spoke about it just a moment earlier, and that is, you know, aligning your not just aligning your project, but aligning, you know, the initiatives that your municipality or state have with the federal initiatives that are at least in place for FY22. So environmental justice and social justice and equality. These are very important things no matter what, but they happen to be parts, you know, items that will help you, you know, pull down money and pull down more opportunities this year than maybe they will next year. ARPA has a timeline as well. In fact, it's far more compressed than the infrastructure bill. Most of the infrastructure bill money will be spent in the next 5 fiscal years, but we'll have the ability to have out years paid for as well. The ARPA bill is much more conservative in that regard. So the timeline here, again, we see that half the money was deposited in most accounts in May of last year. Second tranche is coming in May of this year. We know that the final rule is in place, so all the pieces are in place for you to allocate your money by the end of 2024, which is the rule. You must allocate by the end of 2024. That is, tell Treasury that you intend to spend the money and how you intend to spend the money. If you don't do that, you don't have to spend it by that time. You have to allocate it, report it by that time. If you don't do it, money goes back to Uncle Sam. Then you have to spend the money. Okay, spend all of your ARPA money by the end of 2026. And for all of those who are familiar with procurement methods, as we all are, I'm sure, that is a constrained timeline, to say the least. So having your ducks in a row and having the data you need in order to report and having a plan, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, is really, really key. Okay, so the way that I described earlier, not chasing pots of money, but instead focusing on your needs and putting your needs front and center, and then aligning what you have with the available opportunities, whether they be ARPA, whether they be the infrastructure bill, and frankly, whether they be any other state or federal funds, because the federal government also has a normal budget process they're going through. They also have a normal appropriations and earmark process they're going through, in addition to these funds. So we are literally in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You know, the 3 volumes of War and Peace account for about $3 trillion of potential infrastructure money. So how do you organize yourself in order to take advantage of this? Because it certainly can put a deer in a headlight situation unless you have a plan. All right, and so I call this the ABCs of funding, and making sure you have a programmatic approach to how you do this, right? And each of these funding streams is available to you. So don't focus on one, focus on your project. And the other thing I'd like to tell people is focusing, you may have a project that you're trying to fund the whole project with one piece of funding or one pot of funding. Now that may work, and if it does, that's good. But in many cases, what you have to do is chunk out, right? You heard President Biden say he's going to chunk out the Build Back Better bill, and so that he gets discrete pieces of that bill passed through Congress. Do the exact same thing with your project. Chunk out your project and take the different discrete pieces of your project and start aligning those so that if you can't fund an entire project with infrastructure money, you may be able to fund pieces of it, drawing down the need to use your taxpayer funds or bonding to pay for something. So if you can't get it all, at least see if you can get pieces of it funded. And when you do it that way, you're unlocking the full potential of the bill. Again, not just chasing one project, pushing it around, taking it, dividing out the pieces, and aligning those in particular with the various funding streams, and then doing that for project after project, maybe with an overarching theme, water, for example, or roads and bridges. And we've seen states do that. We've seen California and Florida and Ohio all do a water program with ARPA, and we've seen South Carolina looking to do a transportation drive with their ARPA funding. So that's my strategic approach to it. I'll leave you with this thought, and that is one of the things that ARPA funds can be utilized for is contracting consulting services to help you with ARPA. Again, this is a stimulus program, so the point of it is to spend money. They want you to spend the money. They're giving you a free $10 million. They're giving you all sorts of other additional money. And they're saying, please spend this money. In fact, they're so adamant that you spend it that they're going to let you hire a consultant to help you spend the money. So you can use your ARPA money to hire a contractor, a consultant, Cityworks, for example, to manage your program, to help you apply for ARPA funds, and to help you report and stay in compliance with the ARPA rules and regulations. So, you know, again, not many times in your life you're going to find in business or in government, find the opportunity to pay for everything in one turnkey operation. But that time is now, and is encouraged by the money that's growing on trees in Washington, D.C. But as we see, the season of free money will run out here in a couple of years. So it's you know, a once in a lifetime opportunity with a window that is unfortunately fast approaching closure. So we're here to support, help answer questions.
All right. Last but certainly not least is Nate Smith. He's joining us from Round Rock, Texas. He's joined us before, and he's going to be really taking and showing us how to use Cityworks and our EURL solution to be able to really use ArcGIS dashboards in a very powerful way. And it's cool what he's about to show. So Nate, I'll let you take it from here.
My name's Nate Smith. I'm the Geospatial Services Manager over at the City of Round Rock, and I'm excited to be showing you what we're doing here today. All right, so the City of Round Rock is a mid-sized city in Central Texas within the Austin metropolitan area. We serve roughly 135,000 citizens, and we use Cityworks AMS right now with various departments, Parks and Rec, utilities, transportation, and sports management. We have about 430 active internal staff that leverage Cityworks regularly, and we've been using Cityworks since 2015. Something fun worth noting is we are currently in the process of migrating off of our old permitting and land management system, and we're implementing Cityworks PLL. We also have plans to move forward with Cityworks and Storeroom for IT inventory management and also facility and fleet management. So we've been asked a fair amount of times from other Cityworks users, peers, and so forth, how do we create dashboards and how do we generate visualizations via Cityworks? And so we thought it would be a great opportunity to share how Round Rock goes about doing that. I'd say we create visualizations, dashboards, and workbooks pretty regularly for various needs across the city. And so we wanted to cover a specific opportunity that we were asked about. So one of our utilities directors told us, hey, I need to be able to better visualize all the data coming in from our citizens, all the public requests, things like, where are they being reported? What time did they come in? How much did they cost us? What was the issue and what caused the issue? So we had something in place previously to answer some of those questions. We were leveraging an ArcGIS Insights workbook that was connected directly to the Cityworks database, and then we embedded that workbook into various users' inbox. We even had special ones for directors. But the challenge here was it just wasn't meeting this specific director's needs. The UI didn't really make sense. And so that's when it's a really good opportunity to leverage more of the tools that you have. So in this specific use case, an ArcGIS dashboard made more sense than an ArcGIS Insights workbook. So we moved forward with Cityworks EURL and ArcGIS dashboards. Like I said, this is a whole different architectural approach, right? With Insights, you're connecting to the Cityworks database or importing Excel spreadsheets. But with ArcGIS dashboards, you're connecting to a live data connection through EURL. So let's talk about that from start to finish. How do you do that? So this is our entire process from start to finish, from the time a citizen reports an issue all the way to us having a happy director. So let's start at the beginning. These blue circles here are going to be software, and the green diamonds are going to be various steps or integrations or processes. So the very first thing that happens is we have a citizen report an issue, and we use public stuff for our 311, for submitting public requests. I'm not going to focus too much on the public stuff piece, but I wanted to show you, just to give you some visual context briefly. So what you're looking at here is, let's see, looks like the video is not going to show, but that's okay. I was just going to show you guys our mobile app, and the mobile app basically lets citizens submit a service request, and then that service request gets cataloged into public stuff.
Hey, Nate, I'm not sure why that's happening because we were just looking at it earlier.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's okay. We can move forward without that bit. So yeah, like I was saying to everybody, that was just a quick, like 10-second demo of how citizens submit a request through our mobile application. So it's not a big deal, but I'll show you the next step, which is the API integration between public stuff and Cityworks. It's very simple. So in public stuff, all of the various request types have an associated foreign ID, and the foreign ID is the request ID in Cityworks. So we were able to grab these IDs from our Cityworks database, and you plug those into public stuff for each associated request type, and then we use the service request API between public stuff and Cityworks to bring those requests in back and forth. Okay, so let's hop into Cityworks now. I think searches are something that most of us are familiar with, but for those of us that aren't, I wanted to briefly cover how simple it is to create a search and save a search, since that's an essential step in generating an EURL. So what you're looking at here is the search page in Cityworks, and I'm actually just gonna click on this just to make sure. Okay, yeah, let me go back a few slides to where we were. All right, so just a quick recap. We were on the step of creating the search. Hey, Jed, I'm getting some feedback. There we go. Okay, so just a quick recap with everybody. We're on the step of creating the search here and saving the search. So let's go back to that. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to do that. So what you're looking at here is a search that I've included all of the visible fields in. And I'm going to go over to the problem type and include all of the request types for that department, utility services. And I'm also going to make sure that the date is filtered by just this fiscal year, October 1st of 2021. And that's how easy it is to create a search and save it. So the next step is really where the magic starts happening with EURL. So your Cityworks administrator can, by default, enable EURL on your searches. If that's not enabled, you can simply click the checkbox on your search and then click Enable EURL. Hey, Jed, can you mute your mic? We're getting some really bad feedback. Thanks. Alrighty, and then this is going to be the most important part of the EURL for your searches. You're going to see that there's 3 columns over here: EURL, map, and service. And we're mostly interested in the service button right here, and I'll show you guys what I mean by that in a sec. So let's move on to some of the cooler stuff where we actually take that EURL and put it into a web map and then ultimately make a dashboard. So to take that EURL into ArcGIS, you're simply going to come over to the service button and click that. It's going to open a brand new tab in your browser with a bunch of JSON. It looks intimidating, but all you need to do is go up and copy the URL at the top of your browser, head on over to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise, click Add Web Service, and then paste that URL right into the prompt and add to map. And once you've done that, you'll see that all of the data that was included in that save search is now spatially represented within the map viewer. And real quick, I'm just going to add a quick field to symbolize this based off of problem type to simplify the visualization here. So now I'm looking at all of the different service requests that came in this fiscal year, and the different colors are the different request types that came in. So once you've done that, now you can really start working on the dashboard. And so let's move forward with the dashboard. And I'm going to move on here. And our happy director. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. So what you're looking at here is the final proof of concept that we developed for this director. We put together an ArcGIS dashboard, and at the forefront of the dashboard, of course, is the web map that we created. It's symbolized in a bivariate manner, meaning you have multiple colors representing the request types, and the different size of points represents the cost in labor. The great thing about dashboards is that they can be filtered bidirectionally. So,
hey Nate, just FYI, we don't know where that's coming from, but we can't see it, so we're not sure who it is.
Oh, the feedback.
Yeah, it's somebody not on mute. So, but everyone else is on mute, so we're not sure why that keeps happening for you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no sweat. Sorry about that. Okay, let me kick off this video again. Looks like it restarted.
Thanks.
Alrighty. So yeah, like I was showing everybody, I just wanted to give a tour of the dashboard and showcase some of the functionality that was really successful for us. So like I said, bivariate web maps are really helpful for our end users, showing cost, showing type within the same point. And then the great thing about these dashboards is, we can supplement them with different elements and indicators on the left and on the bottom. And as I zoom into the map, you'll see that we've configured it to filter the elements. So the cost just went down to 11,000, the water issues got filtered, and then we can also see that the supervisor chart got filtered as well. Another really cool thing is that the dashboard can be filtered bi-directionally. So if I come over to this water issues pie chart, I can click a slice of that pie and it will filter the map as well as everything else. So now I'm just looking at water leaks within our downtown district. I could do the same thing with this supervisor chart right here and just look at requests that were handled by this supervisor. And then removing the filter is as easy as clicking it. Another really useful technique with dashboards is to include filters at the top of the dashboard for the dashboard in its entirety. And so you can see here we have a service request type filter. And so if I just want to look at sewer odor requests, I can see that right here. We also have a cost selector. So, as a director, I might be interested in seeing requests that breached a certain threshold. So let's say $100. Go ahead and configure that, and then you'll be able to see all of the requests that were north of $100. And you can see, of course, there's a lot less of those in our city when it comes to the labor cost. Removing those is as simple as clicking the reset button. And then you also might be interested in a date range or just one specific date. So for example, if we just want to see the work that came in and was done on the 9th, we can do that. Looks like we handled a fair amount of line locates on February 9th. And then we can also filter based off of status. So I might be interested in just seeing the service requests that are open. So I'll go ahead and do that here. And you can see these are the open work orders. And then of course I can do the inverse of that. I can look at the requests that are closed. And it will go ahead and filter. It's worth noting when I have this filter enabled, the open service requests panel to the left of the map is blank. And that's because that panel is filtered dynamically to only show open service requests. This is a really cool panel though, because you can view the data non-spatially. And if you were to click on one of these, so say this turn water on or off request, it'll zoom you to that request and open up the pop-up immediately. So let's take a look at another example of that. We'll zoom out here real quick and let's pick like an expensive water leak, this guy right here. So you can see in the pop-up, we've customized these with arcade expressions to fit our city's branding standard. And we also included a hyperlink right here, Cityworks service request page. If you click that, it opens up the service request page in Cityworks. And so what you're looking at here is our respond on our site. And if you're interested in looking at relationships or just viewing the data at a more granular level outside of ArcGIS, you can do so. And that's the dashboard that we've created based off of this challenge or opportunity. It's been successful so far. And one thing that I wanted to mention before moving on to the next slide is when it comes to this end-to-end approach to creating reports and visualizations, it's really important to take full advantage of the skill sets that are on your team. So if someone's really good at diving deep into business processes, cracking those open and building Cityworks searches, definitely leverage that. And then the same goes for having an eye for design and UX UI. If you have someone like that on your team, take full advantage of that. We always try to do that at the City of Round Rock. And so kudos to my team for a dashboard well done. Alrighty, so there are some challenges that we have run into with this specific architecture. And one of those is that custom fields aren't currently supported with EURL. If you're not familiar with custom fields, I have a screenshot here on the right. So you might have on a specific service request a field that says, hey, did this come in during or before, or during or after business hours? Just very black and white, right? And if I wanted to view the map based off of those fields, I am unable to do so with EURL. And there is a need for that. We can certainly do that through workarounds, but that's something that would make things astronomically easier for us. There is an idea that exists for this on My Cityworks. I strongly recommend that everybody upvote that because that would be fantastic to have that functionality. And then what's next? After reviewing this dashboard with the director, he'd like to view the neighborhood and subdivision distribution of the service requests that come in. Are we servicing certain neighborhoods more than others? Are we providing a certain level in care that we should be to all of our neighborhoods? And then of course, we talked about custom fields. He wants to know if there's ever a sewage backup, what was the cause? Was it oil? Was it grease? And that, of course, can be done through custom fields. And then we talked about after hours versus business hours as well. And then something else that he asked for is, hey, can I just view this data in a compartmentalized manner, just water data and just wastewater data? And so what we are currently working on and are getting ready to roll live with is an ArcGIS experience builder, which has multiple tabs to go back and forth between dashboards. And that's what I've got for you today.
I just want to thank everyone, all of our presenters for being here, all of you for listening and taking the time. It takes a ton of work for our presenters and our users to be able to put together and show you these best practices that they're doing in their organization. Just a quick note, we hope that you'll want to share your story with us through the Converge on May 17th. And so if you have ideas that you'd like to show, best practices, please let us know. That would be awesome. May 17th, September 20th. And also go into our Innovate register, and we're also looking for presentations for a limited time this month as we're accepting abstracts. And we know that all of you have great stories to be able to share with our users at conference in December. So we're very excited to see you all there and join us for that. So thank you again. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you soon. Talk to you.